All right, Clay, I'm so glad to have you with me this morning because it was a massive weekend in news. And on Saturday evening, you and I got to participate in something that was probably one of the biggest events, I guess, in recent news history and certainly in internet history. As Elon Musk joined a Twitter space, online virtual chat, not unlike a radio show, and hung out with 101,000 people and took questions from all comers for about 2 hours. And you and I were two of the guys that got to interact and ask a question of Elon Musk. What did you make of Saturday night?
I absolutely loved it, Will. I thought it was so cool. It's not like I was planning it. I'm sitting in my house watching the SEC championship game blowout. And so I just put it on mute. You know, I'm scrolling through Twitter and I just see pop up at the top of my screen, hey, there's a Spaces and Elon Musk is talking. You know, I wasn't playing. And I ended up listening for almost the entire 2 hours. You know, I just had that audio on while I was watching college football games and flipping around. I thought it was extraordinary. And I thought it was a great look for Elon Musk. He's taking questions from basically anybody who was, you know, recognizable, but it's not like it was professional media people, everybody who was asking him questions. And I thought it was revolutionary because it takes away the power of someone who otherwise would have been able to bring Elon Musk's words to the masses. And it kind of reminded me, tell me if you think about this analogy, Will. You know how when Howard Stern, before he went crazy, would have these long-form conversations with super famous people, and it was as if the longer they talked, the more difficult it was for the media to pull one or two headlines out of what they said because there was so much news that it actually gave them more freedom than if they did a 10-minute interview where everybody could decide, oh, this is the storyline that matters. And everybody feels like it's a win because you have a better sense of someone than you did before because of the amount of time they were spending. And my theory in general is, for most people, because of the way we work as humans, if you listen to them talk for a long time, you may not agree with them on everything, but you'll probably find them more likable, and certainly you'll find them more honest the longer a conversation goes on, as opposed to sort of the soundbite era that otherwise defines, say, a 60 Minutes interview or something like that.
I hadn't thought about the Howard Stern analogy. The analogy that came to my mind was, quite honestly, Donald Trump during the middle of COVID, taking those long press conferences and allowing everyone to fire a question away. And here's the thing, Clay, that I want to get into the substance with you in just one moment, but just the idea that a leader, business, political, sports leader, would open himself up to that level of transparency and accountability for such a long period of time, Clay, I think it's easy to take for granted the rarity. I mean, can you imagine, again, to me, outside of those Donald Trump press conferences, can you imagine a politician? I mean, Barack Obama gave 10 minutes to 60 Minutes, and he would filibuster most of the 10 minutes, you know? And can you imagine, can you imagine Nick Saban doing it? You can go in any realm of leadership, from college football to business, and I just can't picture anyone else saying, I'm not afraid, whatever. Yeah, let's do it for 2 hours.
Yeah, and it also, Will, makes it hard to attack someone as being motivated by evil when they just stand there and say, okay, whatever you want to ask, I'll do my best efforts to respond to your question and take it seriously. And you're right, it is so rare. I mean, what do we see when Joe Biden comes out for a press conference now? They give him a list and tell him exactly who he's supposed to call on in order based on the perceived, I would imagine, fairness. And obviously we know what fairness means of the institutions that those reporters represent. And probably Biden already knows exactly what they're going to be asking because he's been briefed on it, because otherwise who knows what he might say. No, I agree with you. I thought it was revolutionary. I'm curious to see how much media coverage the actual event will get. I haven't seen a lot.
Answer to that.
But I do think it's intriguing.
You know the answer to that because you tweeted about it. I mean, on Friday, Elon began to open up the Twitter files. Matt Taibbi put together something like a 36-tweet thread. Yeah. Since that time, Elon has said he's also sharing the Twitter files with Bari Weiss at her Substack. And you know, so far, there's been I would. If it's above zero, it's minusculely above zero in terms of the number of minutes of coverage, and that's just Clay. That's beyond wild. I mean, some people are pointing out, they're trying to call it a dud, but not even on Twitter. I've seen two narratives, Clay. It's a dud, meaning a nothing burger, or they're trying to say that conservatives just want to share D pics of Hunter Biden, nudie pics, and which that's not what it's about. Actually, it's not about even crack or hookers. It's about the potential corruption of a presidential candidate and then the ensuing censorship. But the truth is, I've only heard those two narratives, Clay, on Twitter, because in the mainstream media, the Washington Post, New York Times, CNN, CBS, it's virtually 0 minutes of coverage.
I think it shows to what extent the biggest power in the media is the power to choose what you do and do not cover. And we've known this for a long time, Will, but I think COVID kind of put it into a different level. And I think, frankly, the George Floyd protests, the anti-Trump contingent of the media. And think about it from their perspective, it does make some sense. In particular, they really believe that Donald Trump is Hitler. And if you put yourself in their minds, and if you truly believed that Trump was Hitler, they believe that anything they do to remove Donald Trump from power, and once he's removed from power, keep him from there, is justified. And so that I almost have to take a step back and say Trump broke their brains. And as so often happens, Will, you have to be careful when you have a foe that you don't become what you are claiming that you're opposed to. And I think Trump has made the media that opposes him actually far more authoritarian and dangerous to our country than anything Donald Trump represented one way or the other.
Oh, I think it's a good lesson. It's a good moral for everyone, including conservatives. Be careful not to become that which you hate. So I want to move and talk about college football with you in just a moment, but this is a really big thing. So I think I want to characterize this. I'm going to talk for a minute, Clay, because you and I are just having a conversation here together. I think you appreciate this, but we're both very kind of online, and most of the American population is not. And so you kind of need to reinforce, why is this important? And because I'm in media and you're in media, I know the answer to this very easily, but Twitter is sort of the seminal place from where the conversation begins. Newsrooms are chock full of people with nothing but Twitter open all day long. So if you can control that, you can control the echoes of conversation. You control the culture. And so here's what I want to ask you, Clay, on what I think is a super important story. I'll give you my biggest takeaways. I have about 3 or 4. That'll give you a minute to think, what were your biggest takeaways from the night? But here's mine. And this is what I got to ask Elon. I want to know how many stories were subjected to government-induced censorship. We know Hunter Biden. What about COVID? What about January 6th? What about trans issues? How many stories were manipulated within Twitter? I want to know that. Secondarily, I think that Elon, Clay, and I'm curious where you are on this, Elon said last night several times that he wants to content moderate to the extent of the law. You and I are lawyers. We know what that means. It means essentially nothing more than incitements to violence. But Elon's already shown more willingness to censor than that. Kanye said terrible things, right? But he hasn't incited violence, and he's been suspended from Twitter. So all that brings me to is, okay, Elon, you're capable of answering questions. What is your standard and who makes the calls, right? I want to know, when do you censor? And who decides what to censor? And then that brings me to number 3. He says, Clay, the reason the Twitter was the way it was, he thought it's because it was staffed with people from San Francisco who shared an ideology. Well, how do you fix that? Do you move it out of San Francisco? Do you move to Texas? Is it a product of the kind of people that choose to go into tech? If you are going to moderate content more than the extent of the law, and I think he will, Clay, he's doing that, then who makes it? Do you have the staff, and what is their standard? And I definitely want to know about the past and how much Twitter was used by the government to manipulate our minds. What's your biggest takeaway, Clay?
Yeah, those are really, I think, important questions. What I would add, I've got 3 that I jotted down while you were talking, which are different. I think to answer the last question there for you, I think he has to move Twitter out of San Francisco, because he referred several times during that Spaces to Twitter having an overwhelmingly San Francisco-based thought, and I'm paraphrasing him there. But if you truly believe that San Francisco, which I think it's fair to say, is the king of left-wing woke media, then where you are physically located, as you well know, you live in Texas. You're raising your family in Texas for a reason. I live in Tennessee. I'm raising my family in Tennessee for a reason. Doesn't mean, for instance, New York and LA are bad places. I'm sure we have people who are listening to us right now in New York and LA. But we've made the calculated decision that where our families are raised influences what they believe and their upbringing in some way. That's the choice that people make all over the country, and certainly have made way more so in the wake of COVID. Elon has already moved Tesla's headquarters to Texas, to the Austin area. If he believes it for Tesla is important, I would think that he needs to move Twitter as well to Texas, to Tennessee, to Florida, to somewhere where there is more of a free thought world. Now, what I don't know, because you and I are not tech guys, is to what extent is the laboratory and sort of talent base of the people he's going to need just on the tech side more easily able to be found in California and in San Francisco than it might in other parts of the country. That's a business question, I would think. But I think you're right that question, the way he answered those questions made me think Twitter is not long for San Francisco. Here's 3 things that I thought based on what he said last night. Is Twitter enough? I came back again, Will. He's super rich. He's worth over $200 billion. He has made a calculated decision that I believe he decided, I'm going to invest $40 billion-ish, $44 billion to buy Twitter, because I think civilization needs free speech and America needs free speech. I think this is not necessarily hey, I'm going to make a ton of money off of Twitter from a business perspective. I do think there is some noblesse oblige, for lack of a better way of phrasing it, that he believes this is the guy's trying to put, send people to Mars to save humanity, right? I think he has we're going to save the world mindset, and that's what he believes is the imperative with all the money that he has. So is Twitter enough? You talked about how influential it is. But does he need to, I would like to ask Elon Musk, does he need to pair it with traditional media infrastructure in order to win this battle? Does he need a television station still? Does he need podcast networks? Does he need old school newspapers that digitally are distributing themselves? Would he like to own the Washington Post like Jeff Bezos does? Would he like to own the New York Times, the Wall Street Journal? Does he see himself as a modern day Rupert Murdoch in a larger media context?
I want to jump in on that one, Clay, because just as tied to your point number one, you brought this up on Fox and Friends Weekend this weekend, and it was so on point that's actually also one of my questions I want to ask Elon, which is this. You bought Twitter, but you're a billionaire and you know about tech. So if this took place at Twitter, is it your understanding or expectation that it also took place at YouTube, at Facebook, at Google? Do you think this type of government-induced censorship was prevalent everywhere? I think that we all believe that's the case, but I'd like to hear that from Elon Musk. And to your point, Clay, on does he need more media infrastructure? I think his answer to you, and I hope his answer is, no, I'm going to make Twitter everything. Yeah. Twitter's going to be a general content distribution mechanism with video, audio. And I think that's what was sort of represented in that Twitter space. I think it's the platform for something much more than what it is today.
I think that's a really interesting angle that I think he has to, in the back of his mind, be contemplating if he paid $44 billion for the company, because he's not he believes in capitalism, right? I mean, he's not trying to run Tesla to not make money. He's not trying to run SpaceX and these other things. He wants to send rockets to space, and he wants to, redefine the combustion engine. But the idea is not, this is a not-for-profit venture. It's to make money, because that's really how you scale. So thankfully, he's a big capitalist. And to your point, the question that I asked when we were on Fox and Friends yesterday morning was, I think what we're getting to see is a look behind the curtain. I think the fact that Elon Musk owns Twitter gives us very strong ideas as to what actually is occurring at Google and YouTube and Facebook and Instagram and all of these other companies. And I just come back, Will, the fact that they all banned, Pinterest banned Donald Trump. He couldn't decide that he wanted to get into knitting, right? And hey, what did George W. Bush do down in Texas when he got done? He's like, hey, I'm going to paint. I didn't see that coming, right? And he's evidently not that bad of a painter. But if Trump had just been like, hey, you know what gives me fulfillment? I'm not going to run for president anymore. I'm just going to knit. I'm going to make stockings. He couldn't have a Pinterest account and sell stockings, right? I mean, it's crazy. So point one, what we just talked about. Point two, and this is maybe the most important to me that came out, and this is what my question was derived from. I love the idea of every time a government agency makes a request for something to be removed on Twitter, that becomes public. Because here's my thing, and I'm curious what you think about this, Will. I think sunshine is the best disinfectant. That's a general proposition. It's why we have sunshine laws. It's why we have public meetings for our government businesses and legislatures and everything else. So imagine how embarrassing it is if you are the freaking president of the United States and your administration is saying you need to take down this James Woods tweet. The person that you're trying to censor to a totally different level because you're the president, this is your administration, and you're saying this guy's ideas are so scary that they can't be distributed around the country. I think if they publicize these requests, and by the way, it can be requests from Republicans, requests from Democrats. I understand when it's like, hey, this person is impersonating me, right? Like this person is truly not who they claim that they are. And some people think that this is somebody inside the White House or whatever. Like those kind of things make sense. But when you're saying this person's ideas are so uncomfortable to me that I believe they can't be allowed to be distributed, we should, I believe, as a society, put sunshine on that because I think it's humiliating and embarrassing to the government. And I think those actions would get automatically pulled back in a big way, censorship-wise.
Here's what I like about your point number two, Clay. And look, you and I've gotten to know each other personally, so I'll tell the audience listening and watching this, I think I've gotten to know, and I think I kind of know who you are anyway. And that's part of, Clay, that's in part because you are so exposed. Yeah. What I'm getting at is, again, this is what was so special about Elon Musk taking 2 hours worth of questions. You can't hide. Yeah. And so, when someone really controls their exposure to you, it really, I think, is somewhat reflective of their attempt to manipulate you. And so if you're just an open book, you're getting a much more full picture of who that person may be and whether or not there's something to hide. So I would ask the same thing of the government that I would ask of my choices in content consumption. I don't want a highly curated, polished version of Clay Travis. I want the unscripted 2 hours or hour or 30 minutes he hangs out with Will Cain and see if I can pick up on the nuances or even the body language or even the what's not said. And to your point, why wouldn't we expect the same thing of the government? If you have nothing to hide, let me know what you think should be censored, and maybe I can ask you why that should be censored. And by the way, Elon showed this, Clay. Both parties were asking for censorship. The Republicans were as well, not successfully, because there weren't a bunch of Republicans inside of Twitter to accommodate their requests. But yeah, let's throw open the doors and lift up the sheets and let's all live in the bath of sunlight.
Yeah, I think that would be tremendous. And I think it solves a lot of the issues about government collusion without needing lawsuits and everything else. Hey, our principle is if the government makes a request to take down something or someone on Twitter, we publicize it and everyone can see that request. Either side, by the way. I think that's huge. And then the third one that stood out to me, and this is big, Will, this is a business question that I would have for Elon Musk. He talked a lot about advertisers. In particular, he said Apple came back. He said part of the larger business infrastructure, he wanted to 90%, I think, of Twitter's business model was advertising when he bought it. And that's why he's charging $8 for blue checks and trying to create a different revenue stream dynamic to make Twitter less reliant on advertising. Here is what I have seen, Will, and I'm curious if you've experienced this in your career too. Advertisers themselves and the agencies that represent them are insanely woke. That is, you can build, like Elon Musk is, the greatest possible platform for media distribution, everything else. You can grow the audience as it appears he is growing the audience. But if those advertising agencies and the people who are suggesting to Apple or Pepsi or Coke or, all the biggest ad spenders out there, If they are saying your platform is unsafe because they've decided it's woke, you can build the greatest business of all time, and the companies that will advertise on with you are not. So using Fox News as an example, or using my radio show, like Mercedes-Benz doesn't come on the Clay and Buck show. They'll go on the farthest left-wing podcast on the planet, right? Like people who are like, oh, we're speaking truth to power. And then they're like, this is brought to you by Google. This is brought to you by Apple. In my entire career, Will, no one has ever advertised a movie on one of my radio shows. I've never done a commercial break and said, hey, let me talk about Top Gun Maverick. Let me talk about Yellowstone. Now, we may talk about things like that on the show, but the Hollywood studios are not spending money with Clay Travis, right? They're not spending a lot of money with Tucker Carlson. They're not spending a lot of money, I bet, with Will Cain. I don't know who's advertising on these podcasts. But my point on that is you can be wildly successful. Tucker Carlson's got the most successful nightly news show on the planet. If you compare who's advertising on crappy CNN shows and MSNBC shows, it's all the gold brand advertisers. And then those companies will not advertise on Tucker because the woke apparatus has decided the way we're going to attack ideas is not by fighting with them. We're going to try to strip away the advertising dollars to support some of those programs. Now, to be fair, there are some brands that say, I love, Clay Travis or Will Cain or Tucker Carlson that specifically want to advertise, but it's not Mercedes-Benz. It's not McDonald's. It's not the gold standard of companies that have billions of dollars to spend. I'm curious for Elon how that might play in with Twitter's larger business model as it pertains to the advertising aspect.
Couple of thoughts, and then let's move to college football and also Team USA. The woke ideology commandeered, Clay, the center lane. Somehow they became what was known as mainstream or acceptable, even though it's insanity, right? So with that, and it's because they were simpatico with the ideas inside the advertising company. But with that, there was money to be made, to your point. And if you commandeer the middle, then with your craziness, then even center right now looks like it's far right. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever it may be, they can paint as insanity. And that's how they crowd the market out of advertising. And then you heard it on the Twitter space. That's why there was so much talk of subscriptions. We're going to have to find alternatives, Clay, alternative advertising forums, alternative advertisers, alternative platforms, because it's in the distribution realm as well. Real quick. And we're going to have to find alternatives. It may be subscriptions that is the alternative. And finally, the last point I'd make is support the advertisers that do, by the way, because you and I have opinions, by the way, and you could say, okay, Omaha Steaks supports us. I would encourage everybody, go support Omaha Steaks because they say they support us. Elon isn't exactly adopting your opinion or my opinion. All he is adopting is free speech. So if an advertiser says, I'm not cool with that, maybe you're not cool with America because that's the environment of America.
Yeah, those are well said. Here's also what I would add. Subscriptions are great. I actually think, Will, the big dynamic here that's available is create your own companies. I think, and then you sell advertising to the companies that you own for the audience that you create. And there are some examples of this happening. I think Barstool's been doing a good job of it, although there are a lot of companies that love Barstool now that I never thought would advertise with them. But the killer app to me is not needing to sell your advertising to a third party, because there is, I think, a deep state woke ideology inside of the advertising agencies. I think it's owning companies and just saying, hey, Black Rifle Coffee is a good example, right? They just say, hey, we're coffee for people who like guns. And that's a pretty good brand, right? Like there are a lot of opportunities to sell to the audience direct as opposed to just subscription. I'll give you another one. The Daily Wire basically decided, hey, we're going to get in the razor game. I'm not an expert in razors, right? But every guy has to shave on some level at some point in time.
Apparently.
Choose between, hey, this is a razor company that believes in the First Amendment or one that doesn't. I'm theoretically going to be aligned with the one that believes on the First Amendment. So I think there is a massive business opportunity to be anti-woke in your products and just say, screw it. We're going to go after the 70% of the American population that isn't crazy woke and let all these, woke corporations, let Gillette, try to figure out, the transgender market for shaving razors. And, we'll cover, the 99.99% of people who aren't transgender or whatever. We're not going to worry about, we're just going to make a razor that works really well, right? That would be.
I love it. Okay, I don't want to ask a question. I want to give you a take, and then I want you to respond to my take. Okay, I will always be accused of this because everybody thinks the only opinions you have are the ones that reflect your biases. I am a Texas homer, meaning the entire state, but I am a Longhorn fan. I do believe I can look at this objectively. I do not care, Clay, that TCU lost the Big 12 championship game in overtime to the number 10 ranked team in the country. I do not care. TCU has ended the season with one loss. They were undefeated going into that game. And by the way, have already beaten Kansas State once before this season. I do not want to see, and I don't hate them. In fact, I like them in so many ways. But I do not want to see a two-loss Alabama get into the college football playoff. In my mind, there's three for sures in. And those three for sures are Georgia, Michigan, and TCU. At that point, I think, and I don't love this because I don't love that Alabama and Ohio State always get the brand benefit of the doubt. But I do think probably with one loss, in goes Ohio State. I would love to make an argument for USC. Conference championship games shouldn't hurt you. But I imagine two losses is too many for USC against a one-loss Ohio State. And the same argument stands for Alabama. So in the end, my playoffs is Georgia, Michigan, TCU, and Ohio State. What are yours, Clay Travis?
I have the same four. And I think every year in college football, we have two dueling, overriding bases for selecting teams. And sometimes they're easy. And those two criteria are most deserving and best. And sometimes it's easy. Georgia and Michigan are the most deserving and the best, right? They are the one, they are the two. Nobody would argue it. They're both undefeated. They've played tough schedules and big-time conferences they're in. Then I think you have to start to balance, okay, most deserving versus best. Of all the teams that you just referenced, I think Alabama is the best, right? They have the most talent of any of the other teams that could be in contention for the playoff. But they lost against the two best teams that they played, and they were not very good on the field against Texas A&M, against Texas, against Ole Miss. They could have lost all three of those games. Their best win of the year is probably at Texas back on September 10th, and they were very fortunate to win that game against the Longhorns. Compare that with Ohio State. Compare that with TCU. Frankly, compare that, in my opinion, with Tennessee. So I think the debate, and look, if you just want best, the logical extension of that is don't even pay attention to what happens on the field. Whatever Vegas says is the best teams, you just take those four, and the regular season doesn't matter at all. Well, then you can't.
That's why I hate the best argument. It turns it into ice dancing. It doesn't matter what happens on the field. So, okay, Alabama's got 7 straight 5-star classes. Yeah. So why play the game? I mean, the deserving part of this is Alabama, to your point, their best win is against Texas, who's going to end the season in the top 25. And at the time they played, they were about 21. TCU has, at the time they played, 5 top 25 victories. I don't understand the argument whatsoever. Just because Vegas would say that Alabama is favored, we should put them in. It doesn't make any sense.
I agree. And Alabama was favored by 8.5 at Tennessee, and they lost. They were favored by 2 touchdowns against LSU, and they lost. So, to me, Alabama is out. If Alabama had split Tennessee and LSU, and even if they had then gone to the SEC championship and lost to Georgia, I think they would be in over Ohio State, because I would say then I think the SEC is a higher caliber of play, and you can't hold Alabama accountable for losing in the championship game. To me, the biggest question the committee has, and it's going to be out, like 2 hours from now, we're recording early on Sunday morning, is TCU the 3 or the 4? Because I can make an argument for you, Will, that they are in some way maybe the weakest of that 4. And so does Georgia deserve to get TCU, and you make Michigan and Ohio State replay as the 2-3? Or do you slot Ohio State in at the 4, put them against Georgia, and play Michigan against TCU? When
it is TCU 3, Ohio State 4, I don't think anybody, we know the committee takes ratings and entertainment factor into account. I mean, Ohio State, Michigan would rate well But is that the game you want, a rematch? I mean, Ohio State got donkey kicked by Michigan, and you're going to tell me that needs to be the semifinal of the college football playoff?
This is going to be a big part of college football having to change mindset. I think I love the 12-team playoff, but college football is the only sport in America with a substantial audience where we think whatever happened in the first game is definitely going to happen for every game in the future, right? If you're an NFL fan, like you're a Cowboys guy, if you lose one game, let's say to the Giants, the next time you're playing the Giants, you don't think, oh, they beat us, there's no way we're going to win this one. In fact, you probably think most teams are going to split when they're pretty good.
Right.
I mean, that's normal, like in division play. If you go 3-3 in your division, that's fairly normal in the NFL. And nobody ever says when we get to the postseason, well, this team won in October or November, so we definitely know they're going to win the divisional round playoff game. So, or in college basketball, right? When you get a rematch, the teams play multiple times on different courts. College football has kind of uniquely set the precedent of, because we only get teams to play once. Oh, whatever team wins that one time would win 20 straight. When every other sport teaches us that two good teams, that very rarely happens, that one remains dominant.
Well, it won't matter in the end because it's over. But college football, I do think there will be a huge credibility issue. Again, it's not because I hate them, because I don't think they have a good argument. There'll be a huge credibility issue if Alabama makes the playoffs. And it won't matter because we're on to a 12-team playoff. But
another part about this in terms of selecting the 12 teams, I really do believe, and I know there are challenges in terms of budgets for the FCS and everything else. Power 5 teams, in my opinion, should only play Power 5 teams, because then as you go forward, it makes it easier to assess those 12. Having said that, it's like the NCAA tournament. If you're, what do they have, 68 now? If you're the 69th best team, there's like 2 hours of people being like, oh, you got screwed. And then the other 68 are playing. I think it's going to be hard to feel like, oh, that 13th team, boy, did they ever get screwed here. I think that kind of vanishes the larger you put the playoff parameters in place.
Okay, a few minutes here with you here at the end, because I know that I think you're definitely a USA guy. I think you're a little bit of a soccer guy, not in any type of derogatory way. I'm a soccer guy. I love soccer. I watch professional soccer, much less I watch, of course, Team USA. We lost to the Netherlands 3-1 on Saturday. It was disappointing in my estimation, Clay, but not unexpected. I mean, we didn't play the best game. We were bad on the defensive side of the ball. But the truth is, we're just not at the level of the Netherlands. They're really good. We're not there yet.
Yeah, look, they finished their scoring opportunities. And, we had, if I could go back and change anything in the entire World Cup, Christian Pulisic has to finish in those first 2 minutes when he got that gift. They got caught. They were trying to set an offsides trap, and the left back didn't get pulled forward, so he was completely on. He got one-on-one via the goalie. He's our best scorer. He's our most talented player. If you could have scripted a start to the USA-Netherlands game, it would have been Pulisic with a golden opportunity to score just against their keep, and he didn't, right? If he puts that one in the back of the net, then I think the dynamic of the game could potentially have shifted in a big way. We created a lot of good scoring opportunities. We didn't slam the door. The third goal we gave up, the dude was raising his hand on the back, totally unmarked. That's an embarrassing defensive lapse that it's like when you are playing, for people who are not soccer fans, when the wide receiver is waving his arm like, hey, like I'm wide open, nobody followed me at all, just please see me. That's a big-time defensive lapse. That's where we were to give up the third. I thought we played at times really well against England. I thought we played really well against Wales before we gave up that first goal. But, give the Netherlands credit. The difference maker between them and us is when their guys got opportunities to score, they score. And we... Mm-hmm.
So, and let's end on an optimistic note. Here's my thought. I'll let you have the final word. So 4 years from now, the World Cup will be in the United States of America, in part, in majority. It will also be a little bit in Canada and a little bit in Mexico. That team that just took the field for the United States is really young. 22-year-olds, 20-year-olds, 23-year-olds all over the field. And I do believe, I'm in the soccer world, Clay, you know this, my sons both are super deep into soccer. I think we're on the rise. I think there's like a lot of talent that's now gravitating towards soccer, some athletic talent out there. And I feel pretty optimistic about U.S. soccer in the future. I don't. Somebody asked me this, Clay, and let's end with this. You can respond to that. When will we arrive? When will we do what Americans require in sports? When? And my answer to that is there's going to have to be what needs to change is culture. The money is there, meaning it may not be in America. You may have to go play in England or Spain, but the money is there. But kids have to grow up recognizing that is a path, and they need to have their buddies in school go, oh, that's cool. He went and played at, Valencia or whatever it may be. It culturally has to be not as cool as basketball or not as cool as football, but it's got to be something that people go, oh, yeah, and then we will arrive. There's 300 million people. We have all the resources in the world. It's just at this point, in my mind, cultural.
I'm super optimistic, too, and I'll give you a story for why I am. I got 3 boys, and I see unbelievable amounts of soccer jerseys for European teams in my kids' friends' wardrobes and in my kids themselves, because maybe they play the FIFA video game. My point on that is, Will, culturally, when you and I grew up, other than like Boris Becker and Yvonne Lindell, like you might have known global tennis stars, but there was no conversation about like global soccer stars. And that conversation where the kids all know Ronaldo and they all know Messi and they're interested in them play.
I would have known Pele, and then the next name I would have known was Beckham, and then the next name I would have known was Messi and Ronaldo, and not until then, which is now, because I'm a big fan, could I have named the second, third best player in the world.
That's right. And so, and to your point, we have 300 million people, 330 million, whatever the number is. The more, it's just a numbers game, right? The more, and you know this for every sport, most kids are not that athletic, right? Everybody, most kids have their athletic career end in high school, right? Some of them don't even make ever a high school team, right? And it's just about putting as many of those kids into the funnel and then turning them into big-time playmakers. What I would say is where Europe has been so far ahead of us, Will, is they put these 12-year-olds in soccer academies, and they've had millions more touches by the time they get to be 22 than our kids have. I mean, they are fanatical, and this is a big picture that I think you'll appreciate. Remember in basketball when it was an insult to say that somebody played like a Euro? You'd be like, oh, that 7-footer, he won't even bang inside. He wants to go outside and shoot threes. And now that's like the NBA game in general, because they taught basketball in Europe like we tried to teach everybody to play basketball like it was football. You're a defensive end, you're a linebacker, and that's a different role. You're a 5, you're a center, you go inside. They tried to teach basketball like soccer. And so their defenders can handle the ball better. They can do everything on the field better than they can play every position. They're almost interchangeable, like a 5-man right now is in basketball. I think we're seeing that grow more and more in soccer. So I'm super optimistic that we will make a run. Remember 2002, we went to the quarterfinals. We were in the Elite 8, so to speak. I think we can make that run again and give ourselves a chance to get into Final Four in 26, which is a really achievable goal to me.
I'm optimistic too. And I'll tell you, by the way, because again, I'm sort of in this world of knowing, not that my kids are at this level, but the MLS academies, the MLS teams are really getting good. They're churning out players that go to Europe on a regular basis. FC Dallas is selling a guy every year to a huge club. The point is, those academies are getting kids touches enough that our players that we saw, they were skilled. Yeah. Like this World Cup, that was 11 skilled dudes. We're not just simply the kick it and run team anymore, So we're on our way. I'm optimistic as well. Clay, always love talking to you, man, from hanging out in a Twitter space with Elon Musk to talking college football. Love talking to you.
Always good to represent the real UT every time in our conversations.
I always hook 'em. See you, man. Yeah. Hey, it's Will Cain. Click here to subscribe to the Fox News channel on YouTube. It's the best way to get our latest interviews and highlights. And click to subscribe to the Will Cain Podcast for full episodes right now.